Good morning, Chicago. You're listening to Inspirational Perspective. I'm your host, Linal Harris, your very own life coach, right here on WVON 1690 AM, the talk of Chicago. Inspirational Perspective on your radio is all about murdering mediocrity and living the best life possible. So as I ask you every Sunday morning, are you living the best life possible? And this is the place to be to explore that possibility. Well, good morning, good morning, good morning. It's the second Sunday of April. The year's just flying right by. And I'm excited to be here. I gotta tell you guys, I'm still riding on the high from the Murder Mediocrity Summit and Experience last week. Just what an amazing time, man. Every time I reflect on it, it's like, wow, I get something new. So for those of you who were there and participated, I do hope that you feel the same way and that experience is continually giving back to you. As a matter of fact, today's topic, some of it is taken from what I covered at the summit. And I wanted to talk about identity theft. But not identity theft in terms of, data breaches at Target, Best Buy, and a few other companies got hit this past week. Sears, they all got hit. That's data breaching, which leads to identity theft. I'm not talking about that kind of identity theft today, though. What I'm talking about is your God-given identity. The identity that connects you to that seed of greatness that you have. The identity that makes you a creator. That's what I'm talking about this morning. And so I want to talk about identity theft and how it's impacted so many of us. I mean, so many of us don't really know who it is that we are. The power that we have, what it is that we can create, how we can create it. And in a lot of ways, that's by design. We'll talk about that this morning. And the questions that I'll be asking as we cover this are, how does identity link to purpose? Like, what is the connection between the two? And then, why do so many lack clarity on their identity? Why do so many lack clarity on their identity? And then, the last question I'll be asking is, how does one reclaim their identity and step into their power? So we'll be covering that, of course. If you guys have questions, you have comments, by all means, let's have a conversation. Give me a phone call, 773-591-1690. And like I said, so at the Murder Mediocrity Summit and Experience, we covered the 4 pillars of life. So we talked about health and well-being. If you tune in at 6 a.m., you'll get that every morning. I mean, I'm falling in love with that show. The Divine Healing Hour. Because they're just talking, they're giving information that we need to know. And, so if you're up that early in the morning before I come on at 7, make sure that you listen in to them and all the wonderful life-changing, life-saving information that they share. Because they're talking about that first pillar of life, which is health and well-being. And you only get one. We only get one gift of life. So that's the first pillar. The second pillar is love and relationships. Who are you in relationship? And the need for consistent self-examination so you can get the truth of who you really are in relationship. And then number 3, work and money. We all spend a lot of time doing that. And I covered number 4. And one of the things that happened at the summit is So we were talking Working Money with Matt Sapala. He was on the air with us about a month or two ago. And because there were so many questions for Matt Sapala, I cut into my time around purpose and spirituality. And as I was looking at the information I wanted to cover at the summit, I realized that I sped through some of it to ensure that I kept my commitment of ending on time, because we were ending at 6 p.m. And I was on the only thing between the participants who were there all day and in the door was my segment, and I wanted to keep my word. But I also, you guys know me, I like to keep my commitment in terms of what it was I wanted to share. And so I figured in the 2 hours of this show, I could take my time and really walk through what I shared. And the other thing is my material, so I can share it to whomever I feel like sharing it, even those of you who didn't go to the summit. So I'm going to share pieces of my segment on purpose and spirituality, but the angle I'm coming from is I want you to begin asking yourself, has my identity been stolen? Has my identity been stolen? Now, when I ask that question, because like I said, I believe identity is the missing link to power. The other thing I want you to ask yourself, and this is a good way to know if your identity has been stolen, I want you to ask yourself is, am I operating with power? Am I operating in the 4 pillars of my life, or any pillar of my life, with power? And you might say, well, Linal, what do you mean by power? Power is a different sort of energy, right? I mean, when we have a conversation around power, you think about superheroes. You think about people who can create, in a lot of ways, things that that may seem miraculous. But power ultimately is the ability to intentionally do something. The ability to act in a particular type of way, right? The power or the faculty or quality of power. And power also is the capacity or ability to direct or influence a thing, the behaviors of others. That's power, right? The president of the United States, whether we want to admit it or not, has power. This president has a lot of power. Why do you say that? Well, because he is influencing what we do, how we think, and our behavior. There's some of you who didn't watch the news the way you watch the news now. That's power, okay? So, when I say, are you operating in your life with power, that's what I mean. I want to be very clear. Because here's the thing, many of us do not have the ability to act. Let me give you some examples, right? The ability to move forward in our lives. One such place is with food. Many of us do not have the power to say no. That means that in that area of life, you lack power, okay? Whenever you can't say no, you lack power. Because power is the ability to do something or act in a particular way. A particular way may be the way that you intend to act. Power, all right? When it comes to relationship, maybe you don't have power. Or maybe you don't have power when it comes to work and money. A lot of us lack power in that arena of our life. We're completely arrested or at effect of our job, at effect of our financial situation, and so we lack power, right? So again, when I say identity theft, you might say, well, Linal, I got my identity, so let's reorient the question and say, well, where are you lacking power? Because that might be a facet of your identity that you do not have, that you do not know. Okay? All right. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into the topic itself. in this conversation about identity theft. Now, I was clear with you all. I'm not talking about security breaches. I'm not talking about credit card information. I'm talking about you. I'm talking about you, your God-given talents and abilities, your purpose on the planet. That is what I'm talking about. And let's not get it twisted. I mean, identity theft, period, right? Somebody assuming your identity and stealing your credit card, your information, that's awful. But it is not half as bad as what has happened to the majority of us in terms of our abilities to get fully in sync with our own power, our own identity, our talents, our passions, our strengths, and the roles that we play in life. So when I talk about identity theft, I'm referring to the stolen ability to be confident and believe in yourself. Like a lot of us, we lack confidence. That means that somewhere along your life's journey, you were robbed, because I still have not run into a baby that lacks confidence. I mean, I look at my son. He is confident. He will confidently crawl right off the couch, like confident that he's going to be okay. He will confidently do things that will put him in harm's way because he hasn't been programmed. Nobody has taken away his spirit and his talent and his gifts of exploration and curiosity and learning. Nobody's taking that from him. So when someone says to me, Linal, I'm insecure, I lack confidence, I need to learn how to be confident, what that tells me is that your identity has been stolen. And what we need to do is help you reclaim your identity. So I'm also talking about the identity theft most of us suffered at the hands of classmates, because this is when it starts happening, right? You know, the identity theft that happened because the teacher or the leader told us that we couldn't do something or you're not good enough. I can remember teachers telling me things like that. I can remember a principal of mine telling me what I wouldn't accomplish. If I had believed that, if I had succumbed to that, in that moment, my identity would have been stolen. Okay? I'm talking about the identity that's been stolen by some of our peers, even some of our siblings. Let me tell you something. Sometimes the people that are closest to us, the people that love us the most, can do the most damage. Not on purpose, but because they don't understand the power of their words. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but the power of words. As a matter of fact, commercial was on right before the show started, where she was talking about the power of words, the ability to declare and shift everything in your life. But if your identity is stolen, you lack confidence, you don't have a healthy level of security, then you don't believe what you say matters. And believing that you can is a huge part of this. All right? The other thing I'm talking about is the time when you were told that you weren't good enough. No, you aren't good enough. No way you can do that. And here's the thing, if you change directions, if you didn't do that, then you basically succumb to that identity theft, which means that portion, that part of your identity has been stolen. I'm talking about the moment when you stopped believing that you were special and unique. You know, some of us, when we were young, teenagers, you know, we thought we were special. You know, we believed that we were unique. We felt like, man, the fact that I'm alive must mean something. What is it that I'm supposed to do? And we were filled with all types of curiosity about the future. You feel like that? I mean, here you are 30, 40, 50 years old. You still got that feeling? Because if that feeling is gone, consider that somewhere along the way, your identity was stolen. I'm also talking about the incident that made you question your individual significance and whether you could ever be great. You know, maybe what Linal is talking about isn't for me. You know, he's a different kind of character, that guy. God bless him. I really appreciate him, and he's always, sharing these Pollyannish, optimistic views, and that's good for him. And he hasn't seen my life. He doesn't understand what I've been through, and because of that, there's no individual significance over here. There's no greatness over here. Well, yes, there is. Consider that your identity has been stolen. I'm talking about the situation that disconnected you from your personal greatness. That is identity theft. That's identity theft. I got a phone call. Franklin, good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, my brother. This is a darn good topic, bro.
Yeah, man.
Let me start by saying this. I think every Afro-American in this country is a victim of identity theft. It's going back to slavery.
That's right. Hey, Franklin, you're getting ahead of me, but keep going, man. Keep going.
Okay.
Keep going.
But beyond that, we are still victims of identity theft, and it's hurt us because our true history is not being taught to us in school, and we are lost and find out our true history, and that gives us a sense of loss and purpose. I found a book, my brother, that totally fulfilled that gap. It was written by Lerone Bennett. It's called Before the Mayflower. It gives complete picture, true, uncensored truth about who we are as a people, the first black this, the first black that. I wish I'd have read that book after 8th grade over the summer. Going to the
So slow down real quick. Why do you wish you had read it at 8th grade?
Because that book let me know what was expected of me as a black man, not only in this country but on this planet. Period.
And how did it do that? How did it tell you what's expected of you?
By educating me on the true history of our ancestors, of our people, the first black man, the first black congressman, all the way up to the first.
And what did that education do for you personally?
That education gave me a confidence and a sense of pride of who I am and that I can come something. And it gave me my purpose in life. It said to talk about my purpose in life. I think my purpose in life is the same as everyone. To be a shining light and a positive example, number one, of your people, the race you represent.
Man, I'm smiling ear to ear, brother. I'm smiling ear to ear. You got it.
You see what I'm saying? And also to educate and teach those around you, not only just your family members, but lock them on. People, please read that book. That book will teach you.
And what's the name of the book again?
It's called Before the Mayflower.
Before the Mayflower.
He just recently passed. Great book. I think that's the best book I've ever read next to the Bible and the Quran. It woke me up culturally. You see what I'm saying? About myself and about my people.
Love it.
I love that book.
Love it.
It teaches you things that is books in school. It's not going to teach you. Let me give you an example.
Uh-huh.
It was why slavery for black people changed from slavery to bondage. And there is a difference.
Mm-hmm.
One is a mutual agreement and the other is not. It's a hostile takeover of your body. That's bondage.
Yes.
It taught me what that picture I saw in the history book in school with the little boy licking ice cream. They had just lynched his sister. Well, the high school didn't tell the whole story. What happened there? That was the Mary Wilson lynching. It's classified as the worst lynching in the history of lynching. She was pregnant. They burned her. And this old white guy after that walked up to her, slit her belly. The fetus fell out, let out a crack, and he crushed it with his heel. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
I think a loss of identity is just like what you said.
Yep.
It loses you, period, brother. And thank you for allowing me to say that.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah.
One more thing, my brother.
Yes, sir.
A lot of people don't even know who the first abolitionist was. Absalom Jones.
Yep.
The first Malcolm X, the first Dr. King, whatever. That book taught me about the true history of my people. Thank
Love
you,
it.
my brother.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And I haven't read the book, but it is on my list. Before the Mayflower. Before the Mayflower. That was a phenomenal call, Franklin. Thank you for the phone call. And did you all hear the questions I asked him and how he answered them? See, this is the thing about knowledge. When I think about the number of schools they've closed in Chicago and the type of education that our young people are getting, it's intentional. Because whenever people have a knowledge about their identity, it restores them. It restores them. One of the things I talked about is taking a group of people to Ghana, right? And so we're actually going to Ghana October 26th through November 4th. If you want information, you can go to murdermediocrity.com and get all the information there, fill out the form so you can start your registration for it. But part of the reason I put this transformational tour together is for that exact reason. That book transformed him, okay? Transformation is available with knowledge. The problem is we don't always have the knowledge. And so part of my purpose on the planet is to share whatever knowledge I come across, whatever experience I come across in a way that will help others live the best life possible. How do you live the best life possible? Well, you transform. What is transformation really? All transformation is fertilizing that seed of greatness and watering it so that it begins to grow. And any seed, once it becomes germinated, immediately transforms. Boom, shrub, right? That shrub, as it gets sunlight, as it gets water, what happens to the shrub? It starts to transform and grow, right? You see growth. That shrub eventually becomes a tree. That tree represents greatness. Same thing can happen in a human being, but it takes water, which is power, right, to germinate the seed, create transformation. That all comes through knowledge. So if you're listening, you're getting the knowledge, that's for sure. Phenomenal phone call. Again, I'll talk more about the Ghana trip in a moment, but that's part of what this is about. Transformation, intentional transformation. The beauty of going on this trip to Ghana is getting in front of slavery, right? Slavery is a stage, man. And I love what Franklin said. He said that it's, it was not necessarily just slavery, it was bondage. Like we were in bondage. They did everything they could to control the mind, the body, and the spirit. When I was in Ghana, one of the older gentlemen that was on the tour that was walking us through, through everything, he shared this, and actually I'm gonna pull up my notes on it so I don't get it wrong, because he was talking about this notion of identity, right? And since we're talking about identity, I think this is a phenomenal piece to share. If I can find it. So I'll have to go from memory because I can't find it right off the top. But what he said in terms of identity is that when a man or woman is born, they're born with two legs. These two legs provide them a foundation on the very ground that they stand on. He said these two legs also represent their identity. All right? And you can consider that the two legs of your identity are, one, your language, right? And two, your name. And what was taken from every person that was caught in the slave trade was both their language. You can no longer communicate in your own language. You were given English, right? And if you remember, they changed the name. They didn't say, "Hey son, what's your name?" They said, "No, I don't care about your name. I'm going to give you a name." And then they gave them a name, right? To completely erase their identity. And so when we think about who we are, where we're from, we look at our last names. You try to go through Ancestry.com and maybe try to figure out what your lineage is. Most of us are going to run into some gaps, right? Can't get your identity that way. When you think about your language, well, you don't know any of these African languages. You don't know your language. The only thing you know is English. So then, that part of your identity is gone. And when you look at the history books, at least over here, it starts with slavery. How disempowering is that? So that's what this trip to Ghana is all about. If you want, like I said, if you want more information, you can go to murdermediocrity.com. This is the Insights for Life transformational tour of Ghana. Anyone's invited, but it's especially put together with my African American brothers and sisters in mind to help you powerfully regain your identity. All right, some more phone calls here. I got Geraldine. Good morning.
AKA God is How you doing, brother?
I'm well. How are you?
Well, I'm miserable. I'm in transition, and I'm waiting on the black woman and the black man to realize we are the parents of all people on the earth. So I want to say with you, I thank you, and I appreciate you, and I enjoyed your dialogue with your brother. And as a good, honorable servant, Brother Linal, in light of the divine, cosmological, psychological, total liberation of all African people, right, on the planet Earth, I got to ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Please add to your book reference. It's called Addicted to Right, the Oppressed in League with the Oppressed.
You know, your phone is breaking up a little bit, so when you shared the title, I couldn't get it.
Oh, let me share it. Okay. It's called Addicted to Right by Dr. Jerome Fox.
Addicted to rye, you said?
WHITE.
WHITE. Oh, addicted to white. Okay.
A shame-based alliance, the oppressed in league with the oppressor, and it's a serious workbook for those who wish to overcome. So I'd like to ask you my question.
And when you say overcome what?
It's a system of racism, European
Okay.
domination. Like knowledge.
So systemic racism. All right, got it.
And just saying, identity crisis. I love it, brother. You're on that path, and that's good. So my question is regarding the spiritual agenda and growth and development. Have you considered that every Negro, and I say that emphatically because as we are in this country, under this government, as long as we accept their system, we are their Negroes. And Negroes are just those that do not have the total knowledge of self, right? But would you agree that we should all be a card-carrying, proud member of the only national black think tank in America, the Harvard Institute, also called Powernomics?
You know what? I couldn't answer that question because I don't know enough about it to say.
Let me say this here. You got little books called Dirty Little Secrets, Black Label Right Well. You got a Black History book called 101 Questions Never Thought to Ask. And for example, this is what I want to tell you. He said in his last book, but he ain't gonna write no more books. He said the political system of the so-called democracy is and was constitutionally protected by the slave code of 1865 to this day. So should we honor the living legacy of the double duel of the Honorable Marcus, Muhammad, Malcolm, Martin, top, separate promised land, intergenerational.
And so again,
Harambe.
Yeah, Geraldine, I appreciate the phone call, but I can't necessarily endorse something I don't know that much about. But I would encourage you to send me an email with the books. I'll read. I'm a reader, and I would love to read it and learn more about it. And in terms of a lot of what you shared, I do agree. I do agree that this is the conversation today is identity theft. That many of us, and I'm not just going to say it's only black people, because whether white people, especially poor white people, know it or not, they are under attack too. There is, from the very beginning of the of this continent, from the very beginning when it comes to colonization, poor white people were not a part of the conversation. And racism became a part of the American process to exclude the poor white people, right? And by the degradation of blacks, browns, Africans, they use that to make the poor white people feel better, who also lack identity and have gone through their own sort of identity theft. Now, that's something they're going to have to figure out, because a lot of my energy is towards my people in terms of this particular vehicle, this show, right? Now, if one of them calls me for coaching, hey, I will do all I can to help you one-on-one, because I believe that there's a lack of identity, not just in African Americans, but across the board in a lot of poor Americans, white and black, which is why immigrants can come over and do so well. They know who they are. They're very clear on their personal identity and greatness. And they step into that and they create. And part of my passion is to restore that identity for us so we can step into it and create. So thanks for the phone call. All right. Tommy, good morning, brother.
Well, first of all, let me just say good morning to you, Linal. You know, I listen to you all the time, and I tell you that, man. I tried to make your summit because I just wanted to come out and shake your hand and tell you that I just love listening to you talk, because knowledge is based upon the fact of an individual listening, researching, and then knowing better and doing better. And the thing that hurts my mind, Linal, is when I keep hearing individuals talk this nonsense about, you know, our history and not relating it to the reality of today. Because there were some people who had their identities snatched. They were taken from one continent, brought to a foreign place, made to work for free. And they looked up in the sky and said that, you know what, we are somebody. That would lead into the civil rights marching. That would lead into having a platform in which I love your platform, because now is the consciousness of, do you accept the reality of the state in which you're in? And so your identity can only be snatched away now from your total and complete ignorance to facts. The fact simply is as clear as day. When you stop and you hear all the pundits, when you stop and you hear all of the so-called surveys and analyses of where we are as a people, and yet we're still talking about we need to be educated. I don't think I need to be educated when I have someone as articulate as you in this radio station that has clearly taken me through every facet that I could even possibly imagine in my life, from health to money to rearing my children to my own psychological state of mind, to employment opportunities. And then you stop and you turn around and you look and you say one simple thing, the narrative that you just went across when you said about poor white people. And we still, you know, it's easy to be negative. And Linal, what I love about you, man, because some of the stuff I hear, man, makes my mind hurt. And I know that I couldn't be a talk show host, not because I would be ignorant and irate, but because the stuff that comes across the air is just absolutely, it's impossible to dissect, and more impossible to even get a fix on where we're really at. So I just wanted to leave you with this, man, and that is, thank you, brother, for where you are.
Oh, you're
welcome. And you know what? My
welcome.
identity is restored every day when I hear people like yourself, the air personalities from WBON, the people who come in to try to give knowledge and understanding. Because, Linal, seriously, at this point right now, how can any black person walk around in a state of mind and can't figure out what's really going on right now? It all starts out with a cooperation amongst ourselves. And I leave you with
Amen
this.
to that.
And
Yeah.
thank you for letting me get this out.
Yep.
I leave you with this. You ever watch a bunch of birds, all different sizes and stuff, how they don't commingle amongst themselves, but when you throw some bread and stuff out there on the ground, they all come down there and eat?
Yep.
I thank you, Linal.
Great analogy, Tommy. Great analogy. You know, you did say something about those who reclaim their identities in terms of the civil rights movement. And by the way, shortly after slavery, there was a resurgence among blacks. I think it was equivalent to about $4 billion in the bank. Freedom Bank, to be particular, before that bank was, those funds were seized. We were, let me say it like this. Part of the reason I think it's so important for us to really understand our history is because we begin to get present to our own power, that true identity, right? And this is a segment of the identity, because there's so much more to cover. We have the next hour to cover it. But many of us don't know. When I was in Ghana, they talked about Martin Luther King being there. Martin Luther King was in Ghana in 1957, right before he did this push. I can only imagine the transformation that took place for him being there. As a matter of fact, it's rumored That's how he got on the radar. Because he was standing next to then Vice President Nixon, who asked him, how does it feel for your country to become liberated? And King said to him, I don't know what that feels like because my people are still in bondage in the United States. To Nixon. And Nixon thought he was African because he was. Malcolm X. Think about the transformation he underwent in 1964 when he went to Africa. You know, there's a reason why you will see commercials to go just about everywhere in the world but to Africa. Especially for those of us who that is a part of our ancestral lineage. And part of that is because you cannot put your feet on the soil of that ground, and I'm saying particularly West Africa, because I've been in Africa before and I didn't undergo the same transformation. South Africa, East Africa, you go to West Africa where your ancestral lineage is from, and that will do something to you in a good way. But it brings you face to face with your own power and your identity. We're going to talk a lot about that later, with that power. You know what? Matter of fact, let me tell you right now, right? Because we talked about this, but 12 million Africans taken from the continent of Africa, or captured, let's say not taken from, captured as slaves on the continent of Africa. Okay? Now, on the tour I did, we found out that 35% of those that were captured on the continent as they made the trek from the interior, the northern or central parts of Africa to the coast, 35% of them died. 35%. Okay? And imagine those that did live, bound by the hands, bound by the feet, bound by the neck, naked, by the way, walking through jungles, mosquito-infested, snake-infested jungles, only to be taken to a cold river, given a last bath, and then after getting bathed, pushed into a filthy dungeon where half of them would die. The other half would have the destiny of slavery in the Americas if they can make the transatlantic trip. If you get present to the survivors, the power, the mental fortitude, the spirit of those survivors, that's something special. And I think often we don't think about that. Those are your ancestors. And then they took your ancestors, put them in bondage and slavery over here, and only breeded the strongest. Only breeded the strongest of them. That you are a direct lineage of. So if you don't think that those who meant to do you harm, realize that they really just made you stronger, are trying to figure out how to correct this, right? Quote unquote correct, they are. And this is why it's imperative that we get present to our power, get present to our identities, and get present to who we are, so that we can put in place our own correction in terms of our identities and what it is that we can offer, not just this nation, but the world. I said it before in front of a mixed crowd, but if the black community can come together and step into their identity and power, then it will not only transform this country, it will transform the world. This is a good thing for everybody. Well, everybody except for maybe the elites who are in power. Milton, good morning. You're on the air.
Hello?
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 Yes, sir. You're on the air.
Yes. Black people have to understand that this earth was made for us. We are the most powerful, educated people on earth.
Okay.
Hey, our identity was taken from us by the white European Catholics, Christians, when we were brought here. They have never told us the truth.
That's true. That's true. Nothing you're saying I would disagree
They're
with.
not telling us that the Spaniards that found this country were the lords of the low for Spain.
Mm-hmm.
They were murderers and rapists. Hello?
I'm here. I'm listening to you, brother.
Yeah. They're not telling us this.
No.
They don't want us to know how powerful we are.
Yeah, and that's exactly the conversation that I want to have this morning. Thanks so much for the phone call. Got a couple more phone calls here. June, good morning. How are you?
Yes, good morning. This is the first time I've heard you on the radio, and
All right.
I have about 3 or 4 points. The
Okay.
first point, according to paleontologists and archaeologists, there are 3 classes of man, plus the Australian Aborigine.
Mm-hmm.
The 3 classes are the Negroid man
Mm-hmm.
from Africa,
Mm-hmm.
the Negroid, the Caucasoid man from Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm an old lady, 76, and I listen to you so long, I gotta recombobulate my thoughts.
That's all right. That's all right. Take your time.
Okay, and what is that? The Asian man
Mm-hmm.
from Asia.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those people began to migrate and get all over the planet and began to be mixed. So they're still calling us Negro and Caucasian, and the Asian man, he was considered the yellow man,
Right.
the Mongoloid man. They
Right.
don't call him that. He's always Asian. So what they've done to us, they want to address us to the continent. Now, I did birth certificates for it here in America for a long time, over 10, years.
Okay.
And when I did birth certificates, in order for the United States to keep a track of the people here, they put them in by nationality. First, we had to do race,
Mm-hmm.
white,
Mm-hmm.
national origin, what's the case? National origin, they called them like you're going to Ghana.
Right.
Okay, that's Africa, but what they do, those people know who they are, and they can tell you because they come here from their own countries.
Right.
They're
Yeah, absolutely.
Jamaicans and Haitians and Ghanaians and those
Yep.
Asians.
Absolutely. All right.
I'm trying to tell you this because I wanted to tell you how they're taking our identity. I am an African-American. I looked at African-American. Whenever you see that, you know there's people descending from the slave trade here in America.
Right.
Now, we embrace the continent Africa to recognize our slave ancestors' origin, in that we don't know what country on the continent he was removed from and enslaved here.
Some of us don't know. I know.
I don't know either.
But I know
don't
mine.
know.
I do know mine.
Wait a minute. If your ancestors were not descended from the slave trade,
They are. They were.
They're not African American.
No, they were.
Okay, well you know yours. But
That's right. Well, through technology, DNA testing, etc.
Well, wait a minute. I'm not going through no DNA testing because
Okay.
there's millions of us who cannot get that.
That's
We
true.
don't have the money for it.
That's true.
Okay, listen to me, please. Let me get this out.
All right, go ahead. You only got a few minutes. We got to go to break.
Okay, I'm going to get this out.
Okay.
We look at people like Colin Powell, Jamaican American.
Mhm.
He was a five-star general. Before any African American was though we were generals, but they didn't push us like they did him. We got Barack Obama, who's a Kenyan American, who they say we got African American. He's not an African American, and I've been waiting for the first African American to be president. And here's some more. I can tell you. What's his name?
So June, for those who are listening, let me help make the distinction, because some people might not understand, why you're saying this.
I can tell them though, and they'll know. They can even go to Merriam-Webster's online
Oh yeah. Well, I'm gonna do it real quick for them. I'm gonna summarize what it is that you're sharing, because I think this is an important distinction, right?
Please try to.
Yeah,
Well, it's
and
important
just
because what they're doing now, I don't know who put those. They trying now to say put citizen on the what's that?
yeah, on the census. They're trying to change the census. Yeah,
Yes,
but hold on. Let me say this before we lose the point. Okay. What June?
That's in my head.
Yeah. It's all right. Get your points together while I say this. Okay. What June is saying is that the African quote unquote Americans that we've seen, that we look up to in terms of politics, the Colin Powells, the President Barack Obamas, that they're not necessarily the same African Americans that went through the trauma of slavery. Okay, these are people who are first generation, right, second generation blacks that came from other countries that have a sense of identity, right? Now, this is an important distinction, right? And I'm not taking anything from President Barack Obama, but the important distinction is that he doesn't have the trauma of slavery in his DNA. And so his ability to create powerfully is different than some of us who have not clearly identified who we are. Those of us who are still victims of identity theft. Okay? That's what she's saying. There is something very powerful about knowing where you're from. I can say that because I've done the work to figure it out. Okay? My paternal line is from Burkina Faso, of the Laelan people. My maternal line, my mother's people, are from the Bioko Islands of Cameroon. That shifts things for me. That knowledge shifts things for me. Why? Because that means that who I am started somewhere other than in slavery. So then I began to seek out the distinction and the difference, which is why I was in Ghana. And then in working and meeting these people, right, I began to see that, wait a second, they operate differently than I do. And that was the transformation I underwent in Ghana. Okay? So thank you for sharing that, June. Now we got about 2 minutes. So what was the last thing you wanted to share?
Okay, I want to say that Kwame Raoul is a Haitian American.
Mm-hmm.
What's his name? Louis Farrakhan is a St. Kittian, Jamaican American.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that this country has stolen our identity.
You're 100%.
African Americans.
You're 100% correct.
One slave ancestor who was enslaved here. Everybody got one slave ancestor, and they were freed by the Emancipation Proclamation of the president at that time. And they threw us down. We got the black race. It's a race. It's not an ethnic group. Ghana is an ethnic group.
You're right. You're right. You're right.
We are an ethnic group. African-American is an ethnic group.
That's true.
They're not supposed to be putting that in everything and tell you black, black, black. They're keeping us detached from our identity.
June.
We will never come together if we cannot be African-Americans. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I appreciate the passion. Hey, sometimes I think we get that level of passion twisted, right? Somebody might, well, Linal, why you give her so much time? Because what she's saying is true, okay? And she's passionate about it. And what she's saying is really a different version of what I'm saying. It's the same thing, just a different, hers is a more impassioned version of what it is that I'm saying. We must rediscover our identities. And she is right in terms of, here's the other thing. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna share this at the top of the hour, so you make sure you tune back in. But one of the things that I really began to understand when I was in Ghana is that as much as my paternal line is from Burkina Faso, which is right north of Ghana, and my mom is from Cameroon, I am still different. And it's interesting because as an African American, I think it's one of the things that we haven't necessarily distinguished about ourselves in terms of this whole conversation around identity theft, right? We talk about white people who are poor and the fact that they've undergone some identity theft, but they belong to something, right? African Americans don't necessarily today, but I believe that we can create what it is that we will belong to. I'm going to cover that in the second hour. Hey, thank you guys for listening. You've been listening to Inspirational Perspective with Linal Harris. I'm your life coach, here to transform your lives, help you get your identity back. And again, if you want to sign up for the transformational tour of Ghana, you can go to murdermediocrity.com to do that. I see the question there, Charles. For those of you who are still in line, please hold on. I'll get to you at the top of the hour. Keep listening. More to come up right after this. All right, we're back. You're listening to Inspirational Perspective. I'm your host, Linal Harris, your very own life coach, right here on WVON 1690 AM. We've been having a very interesting conversation about identity. The topic today is identity theft, the missing link to power. And what I've been talking about is how many of us have lost our identity at some point. And the conversation has taken a very interesting turn towards those of us as African Americans and how we lost our identity, which is a place I wanted to go, but we went there a lot sooner. And I'm actually happy that we did. We got a number of callers. I see you there. Please continue to hold. Ron, you're up next. Real quick, for anybody who just tuned in, when I talk about identity theft, I think you can already tell that I'm not talking about data breaches and credit card theft, social security theft. What I'm talking about is a worse kind of theft, a theft that many of us, those of us who are African American, suffered at the hands of slavery, an identity theft that has lasted for generations. And then on top of that, many of us suffered it even, take it even deeper. We suffered it from leaders, teachers, peers, siblings, parents, in conversations where we were told we weren't good enough, that, we weren't special. Then we started believing that we're not special and unique. We started believing that we don't play a significant role in this life. At the Murder Mediocrity Summit, one of the things I had them repeat is, I make a difference. Because each and every one of us makes a difference. But that difference can be in some ways filtered or shut down depending on our own ability to recognize our power, to step into that power. And part of how we step into that power is purpose and identity. So I've been talking specifically about identity today. If you're interested in purpose, you can always go to murdermediocrity.com and download the free audio of why knowing your purpose matters. And there's more additional free tools out there at murdermediocrity.com. And those of you who've been listening and you're interested in the upcoming transformational tour of Ghana, you can go to murdermediocrity.com to gain more information about that upcoming trip. But here's one other thing I want to say in terms of the conversation that we've been having and the distinction that was made at the top of the hour right before we came into the 8 o'clock. So June called in and she was sharing that many of the leaders that we've experienced, Colin Powell, President Barack Obama, Louis Farrakhan, many of them they have ethnic identity. Right? Barack Obama knew that he was Kenyan. Colin Powell knew that he was Jamaican. Same thing for Louis Farrakhan, et cetera, et cetera. All right. And so they're powerful leaders. That's not happenstance. I mean, that's not happenstance. There's a reason for that, because your identity, it provides you a particular type of foundation. One of the comments on Facebook, for those of you who are interested, we're streaming live on Facebook. You can just follow me at Linal Harris on Facebook. One of the comments on Facebook talked about, how this distinction actually allowed them to either, one, deal with the oppression of being black in America differently, or in some ways completely ignore it. I can recall listening to President Obama's good friend in a private conversation where he was talking about the president, and he said that in some ways that President Obama moved as if the laws or the challenges and oppression of being black didn't apply to him. He would just kind of say, well, we're going to do it anyway. Push right past it, right? So I think that was a powerful comment, Cantice, on Facebook. Thank you for that. But think about who you were before your identity was stolen, right? Because, by the way, we're all born in some ways pure. And then we get tainted by our parents. We get tainted by our peers. We get tainted by our siblings. I'm a parent. You know, one of the reasons why I'm working so hard on my own transformation to make sure that I don't put my stuff on my son. What stuff, you might say, Linal? Well, the stuff that we don't know we're putting on our children in terms of how we discipline them, in terms of how we talk to them. You know, to call your child a little N is actually giving in to the European construct, because that word didn't exist until they created it. And they created it to name us. And so for me to use that word to refer to my son is actually bringing him right into the same context I'm looking to escape. These are some of the mistakes that we make as parents, right? And these mistakes actually begin to rob our children of their identities, because most of us, we love to dream at some point. Life was full of possibility. We were whatever superhero we wanted to be. We were connected to our greatness until our identity was stolen. And our identity was captured in phrases like, you can't do that. You're not good enough for that. You won't ever be able to do that. Or if you were really trying to live a life that was aligned with your identity and you showed up differently in these circles, you were called weird. You're weird, right? And so in an effort to become normal, we put our seed of greatness away, which we shouldn't have done, and joined the ranks of the average. Okay? So we wouldn't be called weird. Hey, I'm okay if you call me weird. I want to be weird. That means I'm operating with a unique level of power. Period. Okay? And the truth is, you can. The truth is, you are more than enough because you breathe. The truth is, you will if you put your mind to it, if you speak it. If you speak it out, if you declare it and take action, you will. And you are special and unique. And so I'm telling you all, it's time for us to reclaim our significance. It's time for us to reclaim it. It's time for us to take our identity back. It's time for us to declare our greatness to the haters. Ron, good morning.
Yes, good morning. How are you today?
I'm well, man. How are you? Thank you for the patience, brother.
I'm well also. I want to thank you very much, and I just want to reflect on back on what you were relating to about sowing. And
sowing.
The seed.
Oh, yes, of course, absolutely.
Yeah. And what's in the seed. And so I'm going all the way back to the beginning.
Okay.
With mankind, all of us.
All right.
We come from somewhere.
Yes, sir, we do.
And those that believe that we come from a creator, and the creator put everything in us that's supposed to be in us for a purpose. So really finding out what that purpose is getting to the creator.
That's right.
And I believe everybody can talk and deal with the creator, because he would not put any limits on you dealing with him, because he created you for a purpose of doing something.
That's true.
So,
I 100% agree with that.
So I believe that even though you don't know where you came from, or country that is, or your background, or you had these particular parents or whatever, you know, there's always that question. I think there was a poem that's related to black folks that said, "Black child, do you really know who you really are?" You know, so it's like asking the creator who you really are.
Right.
And he created you for a purpose, so I know and believe that he would tell you who you really are. And you will possibly find out what country you come from.
Right.
and your
Yeah.
parents. Everything that's necessary that he created you for, then he would have to give you that information for you to fulfill his plan that he has for you for your life.
I agree.
That's the plan that you have.
I agree. You know what,
And I
Ron?
believe that a half inch below your nose is very powerful for every mankind if what they speak out of their mouth.
That's right.
That's the last thing what I want to say here.
Okay, go ahead.
Which is the seed is sown, and it's sown in your heart. And your heart is your thoughts, emotions, memories, and mind. And what kind of seed you sow, but it has to go into the soil. And the soil is what nourishes the seed. So if you don't have good soil, you're not going to have a proper growth.
That's true.
You have bad soil or hard soil or all of those.
That's
so
true.
that heart affects the seed.
Got it. Thank you for the phone call, Ron. That was
Thank you very much.
Yeah, good stuff. I agree with everything that Ron shared, and to take it a little further, I firmly believe that my path, so you talk about purpose. I identified my purpose at 23 years old, and my prayer has been, basically two things. One, Lord, give me the wisdom to properly apply my purpose on the planet. Two, help me see what else there is that I'm supposed to do that's aligned with my purpose. Now, all of that, I believe, has led me to where I am now. From the opportunity to go to Africa, to the gift of knowing my identity and where I am, to right now sharing that with all of you. He talked a lot about creation and God, and if we believe in God, then one of the things that he said is, my people perish from lack of knowledge. It don't mean you're not his person, his people. It don't mean he don't care about you. It just means that sometimes we're not getting the knowledge that we need to take our lives to the next level. And so unfortunately, we never really tap into that greatness. And here's one other thing I would share. A relationship with God is important. It's very important. And that relationship means that you have to be willing to listen even when it doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense. And believe me, I know that. Because, I've seen or I've been led in some ways that don't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And then on the other side of it all, it's like, wow. Whoa. I didn't know. So thanks for the phone call, Ron. All right. Man, we got the board is lit up here. I'm just going to go down the line real quick. We got Joe. Good morning. How are you?
Okay. Is that for me? My name is Joe. Okay, sir, how are you?
I'm well.
Good. It's good. This is my first time here in the program. I wanted to go back to something you said a moment ago regarding how we were taken to these dungeons and then waited until the ship got there.
Yeah.
In my reading of history, and I'm not a historian, black historian, anything like that, but in going to school and studying, I don't recall any groups of armed Europeans going into the depths of Africa and bringing people out. If you go back to even the Roots, even that program when it was Roots, Kente Kunte, I believe his name was, he was stolen from his family and taken to the white man's dungeon and finally put in the ship. So I said that because of the fact that there was so much assistance being given to those people in getting these 12 million Africans
That's true.
to these dungeons that you mentioned.
Yep.
I think that's very important. And the reason it's so important because a few years ago I decided I was going to look at the possibility of perhaps relocating to Africa. And at that time, I found out, after I had done some research, I found out that there was one statement that seemed to be common among all the countries that I looked at, and they were in West Africa, and that was that it doesn't make any difference if you were part of the diaspora, that you had to
me that the government would take a certain percentage of any business that you establish, and et cetera, et cetera. And I knew that that was a direct statement made to those of us in who were brought here, who might be thinking, okay, I'll go back over there. The people, I'll be welcomed with open arms, and people will help me to establish myself, this, that, and the other. But that's not the case, and I just wanted to mention that in passing. But you know, one other point I think that
and real quick on that one though, it depends on what countries. It does. You know, it does depend on what countries, because there are certain countries, especially in the West African portion of the continent, that have changed their constitutions in a way to welcome African Americans who are looking to come back, because they acknowledge the role that they played in slavery, and are making an active and put things in place to actively create some type of recompense for it.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that, because there are all people, there are other people. I just don't believe that. Well, anyway, that was a great point you just made, and I'm so happy to hear that. But I can tell you this right here, that the first thing about it is my wife was over there about 5 years ago, and she went over there with a group.
Okay.
And
what part?
One of the things, she was in Ghana.
Okay. Okay.
One of the things they wanted to do was when they took them on a tour, and one of the spots they stopped at was one of these dungeons. And she talked about how tears were flowing down everybody's eyes once they went in on that place. And I know that they have dungeons. They have a dungeon left in Portugal, which of course they were some of the first slave traders.
Yep.
And
Portuguese.
they have that dungeon there because they associated with their great seafaring abilities during those times. And when it comes down to the dungeon that's in Ghana, that dungeon seems to be for the purpose of because they all had to pay $10 a piece to go in there.
Right.
It seems to be a tourist attraction, and it just seems to me as though if I had my way, if I could just pop my finger, that both the dungeons in Portugal as well as those dungeons would be gone. And
So let me ask you about that real quick.
Yes.
How do we know what took place if those dungeons are gone?
We know, very good question. We know that because we established a memorial. And that memorial not only has the history of what went on there, but it also makes one statement, and that statement is that never again.
So let me ask you this: have you been to the dungeons?
I have not. My wife is one who went there.
And so I would challenge you, with all respect, to before you set yourself in that belief, to at least experience the dungeon. Experience it.
I experienced it through her.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. My wife. Now let me tell you something. My wife did not go with me. So she did not. As much as I can tell her about what happened, she did not experience it. There's a difference between experiencing something and someone narrating an experience for you.
Okay. Well,
and let me tell you the difference. Our ancestors experienced slavery. The movies that we watch are a narration of that, but we're not in it. We'll never really fully understand the trauma and the fear. Like we can guess, right? So I would just challenge you on that, because I've been in the dungeon.
Okay, but I'm saying for the purpose. See.
And from the money part, let me tell you about the money part. From the money part, I went to a dungeon that was dilapidated and that they didn't charge us to get into, and it's falling apart. And one of the things that was shared is that one of the things that the Ghana government is doing is looking for ways to restore these castles, because they are a significant part of African history. And in order for us to truly say never again, we must make sure that as many people as possible can experience, right? Now, we can't experience what the people in those dungeons went through, but we can stand in the dungeon and you can feel the spirit of what they experienced.
But if you think about it, the Jews are not trying to preserve those
No, brother, what do you mean? I mean, every city that you go to has some type of Holocaust monument or memorial.
I know that.
Yes, they are preserving. But
a gas chamber.
they're not preserving and you will not find the chains in the dungeons. It's the same thing.
But I'm saying though, they have put in place memorials that state that will never happen again to them again.
Absolutely. On every continent, in every city in this country, I mean, everywhere.
That's what I'm talking about. I know why the Portugal still have theirs there, because they're proud of the fact that they helped to initiate slave trading, and that they were great seafarers and whatnot. But it's just something that I thought out. When I discovered it came when my wife experienced that.
I would challenge you to go. I would challenge you to go and see if you think the same way. I would challenge you. Please go.
Okay, then.
Yeah.
Well, listen. One other point I wanted to make, and that is that when it comes down to identity and identifying my so first of all, I try to identify with the human race itself. And even though we are in this country, we've been brought to this country, we've been sort of acculturated into this country. The African American experience is really quite different from many other blacks around the world.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
We have become what the woman said, ethnic group of our own.
True.
And although we are black people, and we're certainly from Africa, but the bottom line is, what I'm saying is that even white Americans, it's not like, I've worked with these white people all my life, these different companies I've worked for and whatnot, and I've learned from them. I really have, man. I'm not going to sit here and say that everything I've learned from black people, and I've been around some people who really helped me in terms of going way back to when I was in the Navy, who helped me to become what I am today.
Yeah,
and so,
I would agree. I would agree.
Okay, thank you very much for letting me come in.
Yep, no, you're more than welcome. And I, what Joe was saying in terms of that, I think is what let me tell you something. Diversity. So I served in the role of Chief Diversity Officer before I became an entrepreneur. Diversity is very powerful. And the power of it is you get to gain from so many different perspectives. And I believe one of the things I was saying on the break to the Facebook audience, they get, we keep going on Facebook, even with the commercial breaks. And one of the things I was saying to the Facebook audience is that one of the things I believe that these African nations, well, in particular, you take Ghana, they're actively pursuing African American investment, African American knowledge, and African American people. Why? Because they know that we have knowledge, right, from the diversity that we grew up in, from the education that we received in this country that can help them. And they don't have that level of diversity in their country. Hey, it's beautiful, it's brown people everywhere, but they do lack because of diversity. There's not the same level of diversity, right? And for those of us who are African American who have experienced success despite identity theft in this country, we bring that. We bring that, which is another reason why I believe all of us should be trying to, get over to the continent, to Ghana, to some of these countries that are welcoming, and explore the opportunity, because there's a lot of opportunity. The other thing I said on the break was you have a lot of brothers and sisters who are currently underemployed that would find themselves in meaningful, well-paying roles in that part of the world, because they would love your knowledge, love the expertise that you bring to the table. All right, Jacob, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. What I like to say, bro, is you're right. We got identity theft. But identity theft is we are the children of Israel. And those people over there that's playing like they're Israelis, we are the children of Israel. Our history is laid out in the Bible.
So slow down and explain it. I'll give you the time to explain it. But because right when you say that, I begin nodding. I'm sure the people who are watching me on Facebook like, wow, Linal agrees with that. But I also understand migration patterns from history, where most of the slaves came from. And having been in Africa and on this recent West African tour in Ghana, we spoke to a gentleman that said that unfortunately we gave away a lot of the chosen people.
That's right. Well, Israel, in 70 AD, we got drove out of Israel. We went to West Africa because we got conquered by the Romans. The Romans came, they kicked us out of Israel. They stole our history. When we got over here, it was prophesied to Abraham. If you read the Old Testament, it says that your children are going to go to a land that's not theirs. They're going to go in ships. They should be afflicted.
Isaiah 22. It's also in Isaiah 20 when Isaiah says that there'll be slaves that are naked and
Jeremiah.
Yeah.
It's all over the Bible.
Yeah.
So we have an identity. We will connect with that we are the children of Israel. And what you said about far as that the scripture that said, my people
perish.
They suffer because of lack of knowledge.
Perish from lack of knowledge, right?
The next line says because they reject knowledge.
They reject it.
And you know what the next line says? And so I'm going to reject their children. The Creator has put us through a lot of things because of what our ancestors did.
Yeah.
It was the first time in Egypt when the Creator let us go. When he put the
so real quick, Jacob, I want you to continue, but I don't want to lose this thought I just had. Because I asked, when we were in Ghana, I asked that question. I said, and this was Bishop Lance Davis, who was on the air with me when I got back. I pulled him to the side and I said, Bishop Davis, why would God allow something like this to happen to a people, right? Why would he allow this? And he looked at me and he said, because we disobeyed. And then he started to break down the disobedience. But keep going. Keep going.
What happened when the Creator got us out of Egypt the first time?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the name of that area is Mizraim, but Egypt just means captivity. It's a Greek word. It means captivity. All right. When we got out and we went across the sea, and the Pharaoh let us loose, and he gave us gold, and we left. And when we got over there, we made a golden calf. And they started worshiping the golden calf.
Yeah, they did.
Before we crossed the sea, and people was like, how would this sea, it can happen? I mean, if you believe that the Creator can split the sea and we can go across. But before we got across, they was complaining to Moses, like, we should have stayed in slavery. We should have stayed with, we got nothing to eat. Whatever this and that. The Creator was feeding with the manna of the air. So we get across. Soon we get across, they wanted something physically to worship. So they made a golden calf and started worshiping the calf. Our ancestors did a lot. In Deuteronomy, it tells you the blessing and the curse. And they said, if you do not hearken to the voice of the Lord, curses will be in the field. Curse in the sea. Our history is laid out. And we are the chosen people. But from 1619, and how we know that's a significant time, 1619, Trump just signed a bill recognizing slavery from 1619. And in 2019, that's 400 years. And you can see the shift of consciousness of us as a people waking up.
Yeah.
Things are a little bit different.
Yeah.
I'm from Houston, but I'm from Chicago. And I'll be listening to Mainstream. And the politics and how they've been doing this, that's not just, you know what I mean? People like since I was born in 67, so 50 years old. Martin Luther King was assassinated in 50. So they was going to talk about, you know what I mean? I talked to Sister Tillman yesterday. They're talking about what happened with King. You would think that we've been such free. It's not been a time that we've been free, period, in 400 years. It's not one period of time in 400 years. I don't care if they let us get a job, to interview.
Well, I mean, and what you're referring to is this, the systemic oppression that it has, and not just that, but the systemic oppression that creates mental oppression. See, because here's the thing: one of the callers earlier talked about bondage and how slavery and bondage is different, and we have to understand that in a lot of ways our mind, right? Our mind is still in bondage, and if the mind is still in bondage, it doesn't matter if the body is free. if you know, because the mind is still in bondage. Right.
Let me make this last point, bro, because I know some people are online. But from 1619 to 2019 is 400 years. All right. But the Creator said, but know for our surety, after He is going to do everything. We're going to be restored. So we're going to get the reparations. We're going to get, because if people, the black is a color, man. I don't care what nobody say. Black will always be a color. It will never be a nation. And Africa is a continent. And Israel is in Northeast Africa. And you know what? We do have a place over there right now. People from Chicago 40 years ago left their jobs, went back. First of all, they went to the bushes in Ghana around. They went to Africa, and they is in Dimona, Africa, Dimona, Israel, right now. Been there for 40 years. They got schools, hospitals, speak Hebrew. They completely in Israel right now.
Yeah, I know about that. Yeah, yep.
You know about them?
Yep.
Dimona, and then they're from Chicago. They in Israel. We are Israel. We are chosen people. Shalom, Aki, and it's just a matter of time. It's going to turn around.
All right, brother.
We got nothing to worry about.
Thanks so much,
we're
man.
Going to be restored because this is another thing. I don't understand. Wouldn't you want to get to your original language, your names?
Well, so I mean, but you got to remember, Jacob. You have to know, and that's where it's a knowledge thing, man. And that's really part of what I was sharing today is an awakening. And I meant to share what I shared at the summit. We kind of took a great detour. I'm okay with it because the conversation's been phenomenal and hopefully enlightening for everybody that's listening, because it's a conversation that doesn't necessarily happen on this level. But part of what I was talking about overall is we need to gain more of this and be in this conversation and be willing to disagree about certain things and in other ways, debate it. So, hey, man, thanks for the phone call. I got to keep moving, but I appreciate the phone call, brother.
All right, sure.
All right. Okay. Who we got next? I think Chris is next, and then Sel, you're up. Good morning, Chris. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Well.
Good show. One thing, though, we have to always realize that you actually touched on it, is that, and a couple callers, the last couple callers actually touched on it, that the African American is the most powerful person on the planet when you think about where we've come from, the trials we went through, and where we are. And sometimes when you're in a fight, you don't recognize the strength you have when you're going through the fire.
Right.
Because when you think about the world actually looked to African Americans for everything, whether it's style, whether it's culture. They look to see what we're going to do. They come to our communities to build their wealth. So when you think of the influence that we have.
Oh, it's bananas. Matter of fact, I was listening to a comedian the other day. He's a white comedian, and his language, man, sounded like a brother. Oh, come on, dog. It was an appropriation of a lot of the things that we've said. I mean, I remember us saying it more like in high school, right? But still, yet, I mean, there's an appropriation of that language in our way of being. And I love the point that you're making, because if we have the power to do that, then what else do we have the power to do?
And what else we have the power to? And look, this is the thing. This is the caveat. Being in Chicago, when we go into these white communities, they're intrigued. When you travel to South Dakota, Iowa, Wisconsin, they're actually intrigued who you are. They say, "Wow, this black person. Let's get to know about them, or let's get to hate them." But that shows you the power that you have.
Yeah, it's one or the other, right? It's a visceral reaction.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's either one of love or hate.
A love or hate. Check this out, though. We talk about Obama. We talk about Farrakhan. We talk about all these people that have this lineage in the Caribbean. But the Caribbean is just like us when you think about
Africa.
Or Africa, right? But check this out. They came to America to get to show their strength. Obama didn't go back to Kenya and become president and then make the influences. Farrakhan saw an opportunity in the United States to 60s and kids. So when you think about where we are, the power that we have, we just don't recognize our power. We don't recognize our culture. We think that we are these lost children.
Well, so I want to be clear. I want to be clear. I don't know that it's a lack of recognition.
No, it's a lack of recognition.
Well, let me tell you why. Let me tell you why it's a lack of recognition. Because it's been hidden. See, you know, in order to recognize something, you have to put it like this. And this is why I want to make this distinction. When I was in Ghana, it was about 22 of us on this tour. But before those who are on the tour with me, we all went. Some had been before, right? So there was a level of ability to recognize or see in terms of what it is that you're saying. But there were some educated, right? Educated, doing well here in the States who had never seen or understood, right? And so it wasn't about recognition until all of a sudden they had the opportunity to see the truth. And then when they saw the truth, it was like, wait a second. And there was transformation.
Yeah, okay, I definitely give you that. But check this out. If we were to all, let's say the most unconscious, we got this thing called woke, right?
Right.
Let's put the most unwoke people and put them in the middle of I'm just using arbitrary places. Put them in the middle of China. They will actually recognize their strengths and their commonalities because they was like, wow, you know what? I recognize you from this. I understand it. They will see their culture and their significance and their power. If you take them out of their environment, because right now this environment pretty much masks who we are as far as recognizing who we are. But if you were to take a group of people and put them in somewhere totally different, they don't recognize their commonalities. It's just that we cannot right now figure out how to bring out the strength within us.
Well, and part of it is, so you have to understand so if what you're basically saying is, all right, so there's a certain level of power, but the power is not recognized. Well,
exactly.
That's on purpose. You know, when you look at the inputs, right? What I mean by inputs are psychological inputs, not just psychological inputs, but even the food we eat.
Yeah.
Right? Blacks are dying at the highest rate of heart disease, man, and diabetes.
Yeah.
But we also have the food deserts, right? We don't have the inputs. When you look at the television, right, or the news, the black man is not necessarily the black man is not given a positive light in any of these mediums, you know.
Exactly.
Right? And so that's an input. So here it is. If I'm not aware, right, or if I don't recognize this, right, and I run into you on the street, and my inputs have told me to fear you, even me as a black man, right?
Yes.
To fear you, then it's going to drive division.
Yes.
I'm not going to be able to have a cohesive, regular, normal conversation with you the same way I would be able to have it with any other person from a different ethnic group.
Exactly.
Why? Because I've been conditioned to be afraid of you. I've been conditioned to fear you. I've been conditioned, right? So that's what I mean. It's not just that there's a lack of cohesion, but there's a system in place that is psychologically impacting us. There's a system in place that is, physically impacting us, right? And that's what's stealing our power. That's where the identity theft is happening, right there. And we have to be able to recognize that.
You're 100% right, and that is the power of white supremacy, is to keep the masses down by not telling them, not showing them, and not teaching them.
I wouldn't call it the power, and I'm real, not to be so. I'm on you, Chris, man, with love, brother. But I'm real. When it comes to language, I'm very intentional. It's not the power, it's the system. We give it the power by our lack of knowledge.
Yeah, system. Well, when you think about it, there has to be a power difference in order to implement the systematic racism. We allow it. Yeah.
We allow it by watching the television. We allow it by reading the paper and looking at these images without being aware of what I'm looking at.
And that too, we we allow it. However, that at some point we do not have a choice choice but to accept it and then fight against it. Because when you look at our school system, that's systematic racism. What you mentioned as far as
and that's
the food desert, food desert
that's
is systematic racism.
That's systematic. Yeah, that's right. I agree with that.
So either we going to just not eat and not take our send our kids to school. Some of this we do not have a choice in until we become conscious enough to try to create our own.
Yeah, and that's where and the choice doesn't exist until the awareness comes. I agree.
Exactly.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah. See,
that's what this conversation is about.
Right. That's what I'm saying. That's the power of white supremacy. Because look, no matter how good a political candidate is, right? If they don't address the issues that we have as far as educational, the food, it's going to be a mass of us that just stuck. No matter how conscious. Listen, you and I, and listen, and if you ask me to, I would do it. You and I can knock on every door in Roseland, in Inglewood, right? We could do this. We could have this conversation until we blue in the face.
Okay.
Right? But check this out. What we cannot accomplish it unless we could people accept it. We don't have the power of white supremacy is actually creating a dark hole where
that's where I mean, and I agree with you on some of those points, but I also believe that we have, like, in some ways there's a like, oh man, it's too much. And
not too much.
Okay.
Not too much.
Okay.
No.
Okay,
No,
so then what are you saying?
What I'm saying is that we have to recognize where we are and appreciate who we are. See, white supremacy give us this thing. Oh, we need something else. We need to go.
Well, hold on.
We need to go with the Caribbean.
Think about the name of that. Because you keep saying white supremacy. Notice I don't say it much, but by even saying it, there's power in words, man.
Well, okay, systematic racism.
Let's say that. Yeah.
Okay, so systematic racism. Unless we be able to combat systematic racism, it's going to be very difficult for the masses. Like, listen.
Agreed.
Unless we combat that, we could sponsor 1,000 trips to Ghana. 1,000 trips. But unless we combat systematic racism.
So to me, hold on. To me, that is combating it.
Yeah.
It is combating, because let me tell you something, man. 1,000, that means that you got about 20,000 African Americans that are activated in the United States. What that does to them, right, in terms of how they begin to infiltrate the political system, the courtrooms, etc., will begin to break down the structure. So I think we gotta be careful. Like we want everything at one time. It's a process. And I'm gonna go. I got a couple other calls who have been holding on, man. I want to get to them, but remember that, brother. It's a process. Today I choose progress, not perfection. Progress.
I agree.
Okay.
But we have to look at ourselves and bring out that power, irrespective of the systematic. We have to look at ourselves and recognize we have the power.
Absolutely. All right. 100%. Thank you for the phone call, brother. All right. Sel, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm grateful that you're taking this extended time to talk about identity. I don't think that we can have any type of a forward thrust in terms of pursuing our vision unless we understand what has happened to our identity and the importance of having an identity.
Agreed. As a matter of fact, Sal, one of the things I've said, I was asked the question of, what do you think is the number one thing that the black community should deal with? And I was on a panel, and a group of people went about, economics, this, and everybody agreed on economics. Some said, political participation, etc. Got to me, I said purpose and identity.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's it.
Dr. Harold Pace is one of the anchors and cornerstones of the community, which meets every second and fourth Saturday at the Center for Inner City Studies. an essay called Education, in which he talks about the commodification of the African American, and how we were seen as chattel, as a product, as property. And following the Emancipation Proclamation and after the Civil War, one of the biggest problems facing the government and writers was, what do we call these free people? Certainly they didn't want to call us Africans because they understood the value of us being able to identify with our motherland. However, viciously we were removed from it. So to call us Utu-Pidu, nigger, colored, Negro, served that purpose.
Right, something other than that. Something other than, and not sell. That is powerful. Something other than something. Let's call them something other than what will give them identity.
Dr. Pate says that we became what was called a socially contrived identity. A society other than us.
Identity theft.
Define it. Thank you.
Identity theft.
I take slight exception to that position offered in the scripture, which says that our people perish for the lack of knowledge, in that I think it's courage is the reason why we perish. We have so many people, such as yourself, who know, but not enough of the folk who are advanced in their understanding and vision are willing to share and explain
and have the courage. Well, so let me say this. Let me say this, Sel, and maybe this will give you some some room of forgiveness for those who don't. There was a time where I was too afraid to be in a conversation like this. Partly because I was in the corporate structure. I would constantly be thinking about my, how am I going to take care of my family or take care of myself? Now I had the knowledge, right? But I was afraid to be in this conversation. And one of the things that knowledge will do, if you continue to test it and apply it, is that it will evolve you to the point where you have the courage. I put a quote on my Instagram by Dr. King, where he says that, if you don't know what you would die for, then you don't know why you're alive. And that comes down to purpose. And the thing that has given me the courage to be in conversations like this is my purpose.
Yes.
And so the knowledge that I think some of us lack, we might have the knowledge, but what we lack that comes along with the knowledge is purpose.
Yes.
And if we don't have purpose, then the knowledge is meaningless.
Absolutely. Along with Dr. Harold Pate's book, Education, I was also introduced to a book called The Price for Their Pound of Flesh by Dr. Diane Remy Berry.
Okay.
And again, she is talking about the identity and the commodification that was so sophistically executed by these white folk, our enslavers.
Right.
To the point that they had placed a value on us while living. Well, let me back up. They placed a value on us before birth, while we were living, and after death, to the point that they had insurance policies on our people.
And by the way, that's still happening. By the way.
Still happening?
Yeah, still happening.
Right, and even after death.
And let me be specific. Let me be specific. You're about to go there, but it's still happening in terms of you'd be surprised who wants your organs.
Yes.
Black men and women.
Yes. Well,
y'all be careful. Y'all be careful donating all your stuff on your driver's license to people. Everything I got, I'm gonna give to somebody. Emmanuel, you need a kidney, let's talk about it. But if I'm gone, or if I'm almost gone, they don't get to choose because I didn't check it off. I'm just saying this is knowledge. Because as a black man and a black woman, your organs go for more than any other organ on the market.
I need to check.
Got to understand our own power.
I'm listed as a donor on my driver's license.
I'll take it off about you.
I concur with that.
Yeah. But that's what I mean. After death, you still are a commodity.
That's right.
And we don't even understand how powerful we are during life.
Well, I'm a student, a very faithful student.
We got 60 seconds sale, by the way. 60 seconds.
University. I want to invite you and the WDON audience to really put it on your agenda to start coming every second and fourth Saturday, 10 o'clock, at the University, at Center for Inner City Studies, 700 East Oak Wall. God bless you, brother.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good phone call. All right. Well, that's the show this morning. Thank you all for giving us calls. Hey, the calls were phenomenal. I think this is going to be a series because I still got a lot of material to cover. And I took a lot of calls, but I'll have the opportunity. But I think it was important for us to know this. Here's what I'll say in closing. Reclaim your identity. Don't let identity theft steal the purpose from your life. Find your purpose. If you don't know your purpose, you can go to murdermediocrity.com and purchase the Purpose Power Possibility course for half off if you use the almost half discount code. Not going to be long I'm doing that, but while I'm doing this series, I will offer it to you. Identify your purpose. Live your purpose, and with living your purpose, that is how you step into greatness. Let me know how I can help. For those of you who are interested in the transformational tour to Ghana, go to murdermediocrity.com. All the information is there. And there is nothing more important in this life than knowing exactly why you exist and living that purpose. Nothing more important. Nothing more important in this life than knowing exactly why you exist and living that purpose. I know why I exist. Do you? I know my identity. Do you? It's time to find out. Do not be a victim of identity theft. Step powerfully into your identity, powerfully into your purpose, so you can step into your greatness. Have a phenomenal Sunday, everyone. You've been listening to Inspirational Perspective. I'm your host, Linal Harris. You can catch me again next week, 7 a.m. And by all means, if you want to catch this show any other time, go to YouTube, Facebook, and all other social media channels at Linal Harris. Have a phenomenal week and a phenomenal day.